schedule the past few weeks, and last week we finally were done with the very last biblical example we use. And today we're just I'm going to kind of just read through them again so people remember what we talked about. And if you don't remember and you want a more detailed description, because I'm not going to be going hard detailed into everything I talked about, everything's titled. You'll see it says 25 Ways to Win People. If you want to just find it, just look up 25 Ways to Win People, John Maxwell, Daniel Hunter, on our Sword Ministries. There's a part 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think a 5. If I remember, I think I did 5 parts. I can't exactly remember right now. But, yeah. But today we're just going to kind of overview some things, look over it, go back over it so you all get to see what we got to talk about. And then if you're more interested in me breaking it down more, like I said, you look at the parts and you'll find what you're looking for. But we're going to go ahead and look back over some stuff, and I'm just going to go through each one, just kind of briefly explain what we talked about, and what we did, and just kind of how it goes. But we started off with point 1, which was start with yourself, and this was just we used a biblical example of King Solomon in 1 Kings 3, 5 through 14, and we were just talking about how King Solomon had to start with himself first to figure out how to win people over. And that was the first thing he had to do. So you start with yourself. That was the first principle we talked about. The second one we talked about was practice the 30-second rule, which John Maxwell's 30-second rule says we should encourage someone within the first 30 seconds of starting a conversation with them. So the moment you start conversation, you should be able to encourage them immediately so that you can have ways to win them over or to build a better relationship with them. So, and for example, the example we used was in John 1:42. So if you want to look at the verses while I'm doing it, you can. But like I said, we have different parts where I break it down more. So I'm just kind of briefly reviewing this stuff so that y'all can get an idea of what happened. Yeah. And then number 3, we talked about let people know you need them. The examples we used for this one was for Paul. And we talked about this in Galatians 4:13 through 15. And we also read through 2 Timothy 4:11. And you have to let people know you need them, as in make sure you're going, not necessarily out of your way, but let people know that you're searching for help, that you're trying to make this relationship. So you have to let people know you need them and you need that kind of help. Number 4, we talked about creating a memory, and you visit it often. And we used Joshua 4:1 through 7 as a biblical example that we used, that John Maxwell has here. And you want to be able to create a memory with someone. And when you create a good memory with someone or memory with them, right, you want to be able to visit this memory often with them, because if you're able to visit the memory, it's something that gets brought up that's good, right? And you're able to have this conversation with them, and it helps build their relationship with these people because you have a memory that was created, right? And you're able to have something to talk about, have conversation about it, and they're like, yeah, I remember that. That was awesome, right? It's stories. Number 5, we talked about compliment people in front of other people. And this was one of the big ones I talked about early on, because when it comes to trying to win people over or make others see and recognize other people, when you compliment someone in front of people, especially when you're a leader of somebody else and leader of a certain organization, church, business, whatever it might be, when you're complimenting people in front of other people will recognize that and be like, hey, did you see the boss? He complimented so-and-so, and this happened, and wow. And it's like, okay. And that really helps to help build their reputation in a way. But that also leads to the next point, which was give others a reputation to uphold, right? If you're going to compliment somebody in front of other people, it gives them a reputation that they need to kind of uphold in a way. So if you're going to give someone a reputation to uphold, make sure you, number 7, this is the next person, say the right words at the right time, right? So for the examples we used on compliment people in front of people, we used John 1:29 through 31. On give others a reputation to uphold, we used John 1:45 through 48, and this was Jesus and Nathaniel. And on number 7, say the right words at the right time, we used Mordecai to Esther, in Esther 4:13 and verse 14. So, say the right words at the right time. See, if you remember in this story, right, Mordecai had to choose certain words to say to Esther, right, to encourage her, and he used the right words at the right time. I think it's really good because when you're complimenting people in front of people, you give them a reputation they have to uphold, And if you say the right words, the right time to them, it can help them to do better. And that leads straight to the next step, which was encourage the dream of others. So what you're doing is just one step at a time, right? When we go from example 1 to 8, you're starting with yourself. You're encouraging them. You're letting people know you need them. You're creating memories, complimenting people in front of people, giving others a reputation to uphold. You're using the right words, the right time to encourage the dream of others. And I love that each example and each little thing that John Maxwell mentions here just complements the next thing after the next, right? It just shows us that each thing has a certain way of doing it to where you can learn to better win people over and also love on people and create relationships, right? So you want to encourage the dream of others, and by saying the right words at the right time, you can give people something to truly encourage them. Number 9, it says pass the credit on to others. We use the example of 1 Samuel 30, 21 to 31, if you want to read that. And we talked about David and his men. You want to be able to pass the credit on to others. Don't always take credit for everything. Because look, not everything you did when you have a group of people helping you out is always you. Now, I know there are a lot of people that, especially in high school and college, you were the one that did mainly the whole project, right? And that kind of is like, you want to be the one to take credit for that. And you're like, oh, well, I did most of the work. None of y'all did nothing. I basically did the entire project and just gave it to y'all and blah, blah, blah. And I've seen it happen before. It happens. I've seen high school students and college students as well. And, they have a project with people and they try to do the project. And one person ends up doing the entire project basically themselves and then shares it with others. But here's the thing. A person that does that is truly giving their all in this. And if you're able to pass on the credit to other people to help them, you're going to be able to build better relationships with those people as well. Yes, that might not be the best thing that you like to do, to take on a whole project or whole thing on your own and whatnot. But if people still put in a little bit of effort, you still don't want to take all the credit, and you want to be able to recognize others and pass on a little credit to other people. Number 10, we talked about offer your very best. When building a relationship and winning people over, you want to try to offer your very best. Don't be short-sighted or half challenged in some things and not trying to get stuff done. You want to be able to offer your very best when you're trying to build relationship with people and to also build a relationship with God as well. You don't want to be God knows what your heart truly is. So if you're putting in half effort for God, He's going to recognize you're not offering your very best to Him. And it's the same thing with people. People aren't blind. People will know if you're putting in effort for them. They'll know if they have recognition. They'll know if you're offering your best. And so your boss. If you're working for somebody, they'll know if you're putting in your very best effort. Trust me. They've probably seen you put a lot of effort in the certain stuff you've done, and then they'll recognize when you don't put much effort into things. So offer your very best. Number 11, we talked about share a secret with someone. And we used the example Luke 1 through 39 through 45. And this is Mary and Elizabeth. And the reason why we talk about share a secret with someone is that in order to build a relationship, right, sometimes people will trust you more when you are capable of sharing something that is secret to you or that's private to you, right? What God does, what you do in private, God recognizes, right? So if you want to be able to share a secret with someone, obviously you can share it with God, but you want to also find somebody that you can build a relationship with, that you are capable of sharing a secret with them, and so that they can be able to see that you are a trustworthy person, right? That does not mean you have to always expect them to share a secret back to you. It may not happen. They may not want to share nothing with you. But when you are capable of being open and you are sharing a secret with someone, it does build a trust. Number 12, we talked about mind the goal of good intentions, and we used Abigail and David, which was 1 Samuel 25, 23 through 35. And you want to be able to look for the good intention amongst chaos, I guess you could put it. Is how I don't know if that's how I put it or not. That's how I'm putting it right now. You want to be able to look for the good intention among chaos, because sometimes you'll look between the lines of different stuff and you'll realize that even when someone's life is maybe going a little chaotic or things aren't going the best, you'll be able to look for the good intention behind their heart, right? So you want to be able to mind the goal of good intention, look for the good intention behind where their heart lies, and grab it. Look, right? Because if you can get their good intentions to come out, they will succeed in doing more. Number 13 was keep your eyes off the mirror. And we talked about Joseph and his brothers, Genesis 50, 18 through 20. And this is just a good way to, not try to look at yourself in the mirror and put yourself down, basically, right? You don't want to keep your eyes off the mirror so that you're not looking into the reflection of who you are or thinking who you are. Because a lot of people, I think I mentioned it, was that a lot of people look in the mirror and they see so many insecurities, like, oh, well, maybe I'm not that great looking today, or whatever the case may be, and they really put themselves down, and that's not what you want. You want to be able to keep your eyes off this so that you're not drowning yourself in ways that will only hurt you. Number 14, we talked about do for others what they can't do for themselves. And we used Genesis 41 as the biblical example. And this one I talked about when we're doing things for others, what we can't do for themselves, you're just trying to help them establish certain foundations and who they are when they're not capable of doing different things and being able to teach them, right? An average wood carver is not going to be as good as the master wood carver. So if the average wood carver can't carve certain things, then the master wood carver is going to show him and do things for him to show him what he needs to do, right? He's going to be able to do things for him that he's not capable of doing himself just yet. But does not mean you put them down for those things either, right? You want to be able to do things for others and help them to establish themselves by not putting them down, right? Just because they can't do it doesn't mean they're not capable of doing it eventually. So that's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to do for others what they can't do for themselves, not for your own self, but to help them become better without putting them down. If you're going to put people down when they're trying to learn something new, they're never going to get good at it because they're going to keep getting worse, right? You want to be able to encourage them in what they're doing, help them to do something they're not capable of doing so you can teach them, right? Number 15, we talked about listen with your heart. And the example we used was Barnabas and John Mark in Acts 15:36-41. And the whole point of this certain key point was you want to be able to listen to your heart and what you need to do, right? If you're looking for good intentions, you're looking to not put yourself down, you're looking to encourage others, you need to be able to listen to where your heart is at. And if your heart's not aligned with God, right, you should also listen to what God has to say. But if your heart is in the right place, you need to be able to listen with your heart so that you can know what to do and how to do it in order to win people and to build these relationships, right? God's given us a spirit of love, right? And because God is love, when we have a relationship with God, being able to listen to what our heart has to say will usually lead to a good situation or a good alternative, however you want to put it. But it helps build a relationship better with people because you're able to listen to what your heart feels like with them and be able to connect. Number 16, we talked about finding the keys to their heart. So we're not just listening to what our heart has to say, but we need to be able to listen and find the keys to others' hearts as well so that we can further understand where their heart lies and where their decisions lie and how they decide to do things and where their heart is wanting to go. Like if you have friends that are like, hey, my heart is with children, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to teach in schools, right? You want to listen to the key of where their heart's at and find those keys to where their heart is at and be able to pull at that, right? Like, hey, I saw that you have a very huge passion for children, right? Well, let me help you with that, right? You want that leads straight to the next step, which was step 17, was be the first to help. Be the first to help. And the biblical verses we use for number 16, find the keys to their heart, we use Nehemiah 2:17-18. So if you want to look at that, you can. But in the next one, be the first to help, was Barnabas and Saul, which was Acts 9:26-27. So not only listening with your heart, you're trying to find the keys to their heart, and you want to be able to first people to help them as well. You want to help them establish these goals, because what happens when you help someone establish what they're wanting to do, and you're the first to help them do stuff, right? You build a key thing in their memory and in their heart where they remember you, right? They're like, hey, I remember you came and helped me first, and you did something like this, right? And that tends to happen a lot. There are a lot of people that end up making lots of money down the road, and what they do, they give recognition to the first person that helped them, right? The first person that helped them establish what they did, the first person that gave them a little bit of money to help establish in this business that they started venturing onto, right? People will remember. If you become the first person to help, right, people will remember what you did for them. Number 18 says you must add value to people. and we used the biblical example, Genesis 24:10 through 27. And remember, this was a very, very long, I had an entire lesson last week where I did just this one because it was just very in-depth. So if you want to look at that one, I think that's part 4, if I believe correctly, that we did. And that's going to very much go in depth. But the gist of adding value to people is just making them feel loved, making them feel valued, making them feel like they're capable of doing more than what they're able to do. Right? You want to be able to make someone else, when you add value to people, feel like they're understood, that God loves them, and that you're able to show them, like, hey, because you have value, that means you are capable of also adding value to others. Right? When you add value to someone else, they will in turn add value to other people. Number 19, we talked about remember a person's story, and we used David, Jonathan, and Mephibosheth in 1 Samuel 9, 1 through 13 as a biblical example for this certain point. And basically, you just want to be able to remember a person's story. The gist of what I did with this was that you want to be able to listen to what people's stories are, because everyone has a testimony, right? When it comes to having a relationship with God, everyone found God in some way, shape, or form. Or maybe they just grew up in church and that's their testimony. Like, I've never really been through any hardships and whatnot. That's testimony as well. I know there are some people out there that will think, well, that's not much of a testimony if you've lived your whole life doing really, really good and God's just kind of been there. It's like, no, it's a testimony too. You stayed away from parties, drugs, alcohol, whatever. You stayed away from sleeping around, and you stayed away from going out and doing horrible things, making bad decisions, right? You've kept a very straight lifestyle with God, or you've kept away from these things. That's a testimony as well. That's your story. But you want to be able to remember a person's story when you are building a relationship, right? Because if you can remember what their story is, they will feel valued, right? Just like we're going back to that other principle, add value to people. Remembering a person's story will add value to who they are. Number 20, if you're going to win people over, you must be able to tell a good story, right? And we talked about this as well. And the example we used was Paul, Acts 26, 1 through 29, right? And in this example, Paul tells a grand story to the king, right? Tells him his journey, everything, what's going on right now. Paul's able to tell this beautiful story to him. And that basically convinces the king. He's like, what can I do, right, to become like you in a sense, which is super powerful. You want to be able to tell a good story. If you're not a good storyteller, practice. That sounds really weird, but like, trust me, just grab the Bible, find a story in the Bible, and practice reading it to yourself at home or even to friends or family, just whatever, you know what I mean? Just learn how to tell a good story, because if you can tell a good story, you will always pull and captivate people more than you realize. Number 21, we talked about give with no strings attached. And that was, the biblical example was 1 Samuel 18, 1 through 4. And it was Jonathan giving something to David. You want to be able to give with no strings attached. If you're giving with strings attached, you will not be someone that's going to be remembered, because they're going to remember, oh, you're the guy, you gave something to me, but you expected stuff in return immediately. You're kind of selfish, right? But if you give with no strings attached, people will remember that generosity. Remember, I talked about that. That generosity is a very deep thing. So when it comes to giving with no strings attached, you must have a genuine generosity and kindness when it comes to giving to people, so that you will show that your heart isn't just expecting stuff. A lot of people, just because of the world we live in, when you give stuff and try to help people out, they're like, okay, so what's the catch? It's like, there's no catch, right? There's no catch. God sent his son to die for us that we could have a relationship with Jesus. There was no catch, right? God was not like, he wasn't like, okay, so now that Jesus died for you, you have to accept me. If you don't, you're going to die, right? It wasn't like there was like, okay, you're dead no matter what just because this happened. No, God was still like, hey, you are now able to come through Jesus to have a relationship with me, right? So because of that, especially for that example, we were able to have a relationship with God. And yes, God still wants us to have a relationship with him, but we still have a choice to not want to have a relationship with God. There's no strings attached to that. We can choose to live for God, or we can choose to not live for God. And that's just a really big example, And number 22, we talked about learn your mailman's name. In this, we used Paul an example of Romans 16:3-15, the entire section of that in that chapter, he talks about, I want to give thanks to this person, thanks to that person. I want to give thanks to them. Greet this person, greet this person. And he named each person name after name. And I mentioned the man's in prison and remembered all these people's names by name, what they've done, and the things and the works they've done for God, right? So you want to be able to learn your mailman's name. Basically, what's this meaning is just learn to give recognition to the people that have done something in your life, right? Learn to give recognition to it. Remember their name, because you remember people's names, people will be like, oh, my, wait, you remember me, right? Whether you're famous or not, whatever the case may be, whether you have a big business or a small business, whether you're a huge pastor or a small pastor, whatever it might be, right? If you remember someone's name, people will feel valued and recognized just because you mention them, right? Like I said, Paul in this entire portion of that chapter just says, greet them, greet him, greet her, greet this person, this person. He remembers each person by name and writes them down, and he's able to make them feel welcomed and encouraged and recognized. People are going to welcome them, right? They're going to greet them like, hey, Paul mentioned your name. You're so-and-so, right? Yeah. Paul mentioned me? Yeah. Well, that's awesome, right? And they'll feel that recognition. That's what you want to be able to do. Remember people's names. Number 23, we talked about point out people's strengths. You're basically, when I talked about this, the biblical example we used was Peter and Paul in 2 Peter 3:14-16. And you want to be able to point out someone's strengths, right? Yes, you can point out their weaknesses as well, but amidst their weaknesses, that means they still have strengths in other places, right? So if you point out their strengths, you'll help them to figure out where and how to grow themselves further and higher and then make themselves better, right? We watched this Gran Turismo movie the other night, which was absolutely amazing, true story, and I think this is just a cool little example, but the driver or the person that was the coach had to point out the kid's strengths, that because he's never driven a car before. He only raced in this virtual game, like in this game that he played that was very realistic to real racing. But he had to point out the fact, like, hey, this isn't like this, blah, blah, blah. He pointed out his weaknesses, but he also showed him, hey, you're really good at this. Do it. Exceed in it. And throughout the movie, you see different examples when he tells him, I know what your strength is at, go for it. And the kid would just do it, right? And that's what you want to be able to do. You want to find people's strengths, point it out, and be like, hey, just do this and excel at this and go hard, right? If you do this, you're going to succeed because those are the strengths these are the things that you're good at doing. Number 24, we talked about write notes of encouragement. Ephesians and 2 Timothy it's just a giant note of encouragement to the Philippians, right? Huge notes of encouragement. We talked about this. Paul was able to write this entire section out, and I showed an example when I talked about these, that immediately, right off the start of each chapter, he immediately tells them, hey, be encouraged. Hey, you're doing great. Hey, I love what you're doing with this, basically, right? He's just showing them encouragement, saying you're doing great works of God, God's working in you. He just gives them example after example and just saying, hey, you're doing amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. God's going to keep blessing you, right? And that's what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to write notes of encouragement to others to help them to understand that, hey, you are doing something right? You're doing great. Keep working through it, right? So once we point out their strength, what you want to do is what? Keep encouraging them in the thing that they're strong in what they're doing so they can get better. And the last point we talked about was help people win, right? So you're doing all these different things. You go through all these different examples that we talked about, right? You start with yourself. You encourage people. You let people know you need them. You create a memory and visit it. You compliment people in front of people. Give others a reputation to uphold. You say the right words at the right time. Encourage the dream of others. Pass the credit on to others. Offer your very best. Share a secret with someone to build better relationship. Mind the goal of good intention. You want to keep your eyes off the mirror like we talked about. Do for others what they can't do for themselves. Listen with your heart. Find the keys to their heart. Be the first to help. Add value to people. Remember a person's story, right? Tell a good story. You want to give with no strings attached. Learn your mailman's name. Point out people's strengths. Write notes of encouragement. And when you do all these things, right, and you're living out this stuff, you will help people win. And that's his last point, right? John Maxwell points out I love that the last point throughout all this different stuff is you'll help people win. And that's what you want to be able to do. As a leader, if you are not helping people win, you are not doing a good job to encourage them to grow and become stronger in their faith with God, or become stronger in whatever business they're doing, or become stronger as a person in general. But if you are living out as a good example as a leader, you're helping people, you're doing all these different things that we talked about in the lessons that we've gone out. And if you want to, like I said, if you haven't looked at any of the stuff that we've done, or you want to know more in depth of the stuff that I did teach, there are different parts, and you can rewatch through that stuff. And I go more in depth in each little point that we have made. But to end it all off, you just want to help people win. And when you're doing all these things, you will help people win. And the biblical example we use was Judges 4:4 through 5, if you're curious. But I do go in depth. This was actually last week's, so if you really just mainly want to know this little last section of what I talked about, you can look at that video from last week. But that's the main goal, right? If we're gonna win people, which is John Maxwell's 25 ways to win people, you have to help people win, right? That's the best way you're gonna help. That's the best way you're gonna win relationships with people, is helping them win in their life and succeed in their life as well. So that was a brief review. I didn't go super in depth with everything I did, obviously. Like I said, this is just mainly a review of everything I've talked about the last couple of weeks. And if you want to look more into stuff and be more involved in that, look over the past couple of videos. They're marked. My mom's putting up a Cash App thing right now on the screen. So if you want to be able to give to Sword Ministries, you can do on Cash App. We have other stuff as well. But I just want to encourage you, if you've enjoyed some of the stuff that's been going on, you like the review, and you really want to know more in depth, I encourage you to go watch those videos. I hope they really help change some of my perspective of what it means to be a better leader for you, and how to win people, and how to love people, and how to just encourage and add value. And I really hope it does something good for you, because I know it's definitely been a nice little thing for me as well, to help me understand people better and whatnot. So, but I just want to go ahead and pray. Lord, Lord, thank you for everyone that's watching, for everyone that's here right now, God. I just want to pray as I've gone over the review. I just want to be able to encourage everyone to step further into the glory that God's giving them, to help them to win people, and to help people win as well, and to help encourage others to encourage others, and to help people add value to others while they add value to themselves as well. I just want to pray that we grow in confidence in the things of God, and that we grow in confidence in who we are and what God's done in our lives, so that we can help people grow and become stronger in theirs as well. In the name of Jesus, amen.